All right, guys, this is our session on a very important topic that I feel a lot of people are confused by and they have a lot of questions in this process. So, I wanted to provide you guys with an overview of the three shorter core questions that almost every applicant is going to have to cover for their Harvard Kennedy School essays and applications. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to go through the adversity statement, perspective statement, and personal history statement or essays. All right. Any questions you guys have, pop it in the chat. As you can see there, we'll be monitoring that chat and answer any questions that you may have as we go through the process. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. First and foremost, why I feel I'm qualified to speak on this subject matter. I went to a series of schools here in the US and in the UK, UCLA, Berkeley for law school. I'm a lawyer, Cambridge in England, and then I went to Harvard to pursue my degree at the Kennedy School in 2016-17, almost 10 years ago. I did my mid-career program in there. And while I was there, I was a recipient of the Center for Public Leadership Fellowship, where I got a full ride and a stipend. And then the subsequent years, I was on the selection committee for that exact fellowship, helping select the right candidates for it. And I still have my finger on the pulse at Harvard Kennedy School because I was the co-chair of the Alumni Council there, and I'm still a member of that council. So very much have my finger on the pulse of what's kind of happening on the ground and all the good information that we would need to have a better understanding of the Kennedy School and its policies and how it's ever evolving. So that's my background. I took all of those years of experience and put together the Harvard Kennedy School Admissions Mastery Guide, which essentially is everything you're going to ever need to know about the Harvard Kennedy School. It is about 130-page guide from is the Kennedy School right for you? Is policy school right for you? Right? You can see that in the chapters over there. What you should be considering when you come visit the Kennedy School, all that good stuff, all your preparatory kind of ideas, and then all the way through to how do you stand out as a candidate? How do you put together your applications? How do you find the right letters of recommendation? How to put together your resume? When to apply in terms of timing? What you should be thinking about in terms of financial aid and finances? Once you're admitted, how you can maximize your experience at the Kennedy School. So pretty much everything you'll ever need to know about it. It's the only book ever published on the subject matter. So definitely encourage you guys to pick that up. Should you think of applying to the Kennedy Schools, I think it'll be a really good manual, how-to-do guide to get you across the goal line. All right. So here's an overview of the essays themselves. We've got the background statement, the bio statement, which you'll discover when you start piecing together your application materials. Those are pretty much mandatory for everyone. There's only a slight distinction between the two, so you definitely want to know how to answer those. In the guidebook, I have a whole section on it that will help you through that process. We've got the career goals essay, which essentially is very similar to, I believe, the JFK essay, which is very similar, I believe, to the public policy essay. So all those are very similar. And you've got the MPP essay. So you've got all of those are very similar that cover essentially the same topic, which is what are your goals and how you plan to accomplish them, and then how will the Kennedy School help you do that. All right. English language is only applicable if you studied internationally at a non-English speaking university or high school. Then you've got the adversity essay, which, as you see, 3 out of the 4 programs require. You've got the, leadership essay is for the mid-career, for the MPID. We've got the MPP essay, optional statement. Again, happy to answer any of those kind of questions about it because anyone can use it if they need to. I'm a big fan of it. If there's any kind of discrepancy in your academic scores, your GRE, if you took it, your GPA, gaps in your education, any criminal issues, anything that you want them to kind of know about that doesn't necessarily fit in an essay itself. Then we've got the personal history essay, which, as you can tell, everyone has to do it. It's pretty much one of the only short essays that everyone has to do. Personal history essay is almost like what was known as the diversity essay. You've got the perspectives essay, which again, 3 out of the 4 programs, not the MPID, they want you to do. And that's it. The rest of the ones are more program specific. So again, as you can see, these are pretty much across the board, and that's why we're going to be covering it today. All right. Now, we created something called the art of story crafting. Actually, let me have a quick essay. Would you do an optional essay for a gap year? Yeah. So that's not even a gap in education. That's like a gap year. So you've taken a time between high school and college. You may want to talk about that, unless you've got like 5, 10 years of experience, and then it doesn't really matter. But if you took time away from after college and into your first job, you may want to talk about that as a gap year, that you didn't work, and there's kind of no continuity in terms of college to another program or college to work, and you took a year out. You kind of want to describe that in your application so there's no confusion and this assuages any of the concerns that they have. So hopefully that helps you there, Anna. Okay, so the art of this of story crafting, right, which really is an art, is really broken up in our perspective into 5 chunks. You've got the story creating, which is where you're living your life, you're living the story that you're going to be writing about in your application. It sounds kind of weird, but it really does exist. The idea is that if you're a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years out or plus, the idea is that you can start seeing deficiencies in your application. Maybe you don't have enough adversity that you can talk about, or perspectives essays or topics that you can talk about. Maybe you haven't really kind of fine-tuned your career goals. Maybe you haven't really discovered that professional contribution. Then you start to pursue those experiences, those life happenings that get you to be able to more effectively answer those questions. So the story creating process starts years before you apply, and maybe at the maximum 1 year before you apply, or at a minimum 1 year before you apply, so that you have the opportunity to kind of really think through it. So we're not going to talk about that today, because I'm hoping that I'm talking to an audience that is more focused on the today and applying for this admission cycle. Then you say, okay, now that I've created all these crazy, awesome life experiences, I don't want to forget about them. So you start to document your experiences, creating a mechanism of remembrance, which is extremely important. And you do that by just kind of doing a brain dump onto a document, and we're going to talk about that shortly. But you're basically storyboarding, the kind of idea that we see in the movies. You put a storyboard out. Okay, I've had this experience that was about diversity and what that looks like. I have this experience about perspectives and what that looks like, and on and on and on. So you want to have that as an opportunity that you can document it all down, so you don't forget it and know where to put it in each one of the different essays, right? Then we've got the story testing process. Now that we've helped create the story, now that we've put the documents down, now how do we find a common theme among all of them and test that theme, right? So maybe you start saying, I'm going to write about X, or my theme is going to be X. Does that resonate? Is it authentic? Does it hold water? Is it backed by example? Yes, no. If it isn't, maybe it's not the right story. Then you say, okay, well, I was thinking about doing X, Y, and Z, and then adding this and adding this. Is there a theme, a thread between all of them? Is this part relevant to this part? Yes or no? No, it isn't. Then it doesn't pass the relevancy test. Is it authentic? Is it unique? Is it emotionally captivating, right? So you start to find that theme. Once you found that theme, the idea, the general construct, right? Then you start to structure the theme and the idea, and then the storyboarding around the structure of the story itself, right? And you design the story, which is based around the narrative arc. Okay. Once you've structured the story and you have the theme and you've structured it beautifully from a beginning, middle, and end, then you want to check to see if you have story success. Is there any redundancy in there? Is there any cliche usage in there? Is it over the limit? Is it, properly spell checked and syntax and so forth? Does it have a divisive topic? All these kind of things you want to do a once over that checks all those things to make sure that these parts of the whole equation are effective, clear, and will really resonate with the audience, in this case, the admissions committee. Today, we're going to be covering a bit about storyboarding. We're going to be covering story structuring, and we're going to be covering a little bit on story success. All these are I'm touching on it. You have this much more in depth in the guidebook itself. And I'm happy to answer any questions about this offline. All right. Let's get into storyboarding. So here, a good way of doing it is to say, what are the top 10 learning moments, personal challenges, life accomplishments. So start, basically, if you have to put down 10 of these things down onto paper, you know, what would you focus on? What would be the things that really make you unique? And you want to be thinking about, self-assessment, strengths, talents, skills, right? Think about those things. What really makes you unique, your superpower, right? Which comes down to passions and interests, hobbies, superpowers, right? Things that really make you stand out. Like for me, a superpower would be limitless travel. I love traveling, right? A superpower for me maybe would be I don't know. I don't have that many superpowers I can think off the top of my head, but something that really makes you stand out, that really kind of gives you that distinction. Maybe a superpower would be public speaking. I haven't gotten a ton of gigs in it, but I love doing it. And you kind of want to see like what kind of artifacts you have that you can share to kind of show how this is your superpower. So, a book you wrote, or a channel you have, or a skill that you've developed into some like concerto that you can then share the footage with an audience, right? And then perspectives, diverse viewpoints, cultural exposure, personal experiences, to really kind of think through it. So you can say, I have this diverse experience, put it down as one of the top 10 things about you, right? I have this skill, I have this hobby, I have this superpower, I have this strength, I have this weakness, whatever it may be. Put it down as main talking points that when we look at all 10 things together, we really get a good sense of who you are and what you've accomplished and what makes you unique. Okay. Now, you may say, but that has nothing to do with HKS. Fine. Just put it down. And then eventually we'll say, nah, this is not going to pass the relevancy test. No, doesn't really kind of bode well with the thread of the theme that we're trying to create. But for now, let's just put it down on paper. All right. So then we get into the story structuring process, right? And this, if anybody kind of follows Hollywood movies, is very commonplace in Hollywood, right? You start off with an action sequence. You start developing the character's background, right? The protagonist. You start developing the story around the character, right? These are almost inextricably tied in many ways. But let's just say that you hyper focus on this, zoom in on them, then start zooming out on the story and where they fit into the story. And then there's going to be a point where they have to make a decision, an inflection point, a climax of the movie. And in our case, the way we're describing it is either it could go towards you go to academia, you go to the Kennedy School, or you decide to continue the job that you have and the life that you have. If you do decide the Kennedy School, enter the guide. In this case, I'm using Yoda as the example because that's kind of what happened with Star Wars, right? In Star Wars, we started off with an action sequence. We start talking about Luke Skywalker. We developed a story around Luke Skywalker and the evil empire and what he needs to do to overcome it. And then we have an inflection point. Either becomes a Jedi, or he becomes Luke Skywalker, or he becomes a Jedi. He chooses to become a Jedi. In comes Yoda to train him to become a Jedi. And then we know the end of that the series, or God knows how many series there are. But the end where he starts fighting the evil empire as a Jedi. All right. In this case, Yoda is going to be the Kennedy School. So once you've kind of established what direction you want to go, either continue what you're doing or go to the Kennedy School, we then say, okay, now that we know that we want to go to the Kennedy School because we want to achieve this, and the only way we can achieve this is through the Kennedy School, then we start talking about the importance of the Kennedy School in your journey. And then finally, we bring the story back full circle. Now, you may say, Hamada, can I really use this for all the essays? The answer is probably not. Why? Because you don't have enough time and space to write all of this in 250 words, as you will see. But what we do is we use this massive storyline to kind of give us a better sense of how everything kind of fits together. Then each one of these areas will bifurcate with separate experiences that we've developed from the brain dumping. Okay? So this just tells you the overall thread, the theme, the whole concept. We put it all here, and then from there, we can kind of pull from it to kind of fill the other shorter essays. But if you're applying to, let's say, hypothetically, law school or something like that, we have a personal statement. This is ideal for just that one statement. But given that we have multiple statements for the Kennedy School, then we just use this as the core theme. This is the anchor. And then we can deviate from it and create other aspects from it. I put the camera because, again, think about your life like a movie. And I kind of showed how that kind of fits into here. And then I have the TED symbol here because you want to think about that hook, that theme that you really want the audience to kind of come away with having read all your essays. All right. So let's jump into the first essay. And again, please feel free to ask any question as we go through this process. Describe a time when you faced adversity or significant challenge to achieving your goals and how navigating through this shaped your educational career trajectory. I'll actually paint this with a client I was recently working with. In his case, his father had passed away when he was just kind of starting work. And that was very monumental because the country where he was from, the requirement is that the eldest male really kind of takes over to kind of help the family, and not just in locally, his own family, and not just the family locally, but also the family in his native country. And so he had to put his education, his further education on pause. He had to really step up and push and take on multiple jobs and multiple roles within those jobs so he can make ends meet, so he can kind of supply and support the family. And that really impacted his education career trajectory in many ways. But what we then spun it is to say that through that experience of hardship, he didn't resent his family and everyone around him for asking for support and help. In fact, he embraced it, because what he ended up doing is, by that mere necessity of being in that situation, he pushed himself so hard to really be so intentional with his time, intentional with his efforts, that he became just so much more bulletproof and resilient against challenges. So he excelled at work. He met financial goals. He was able to help his family. His family was able to see and learn about a strong work ethic. And he took that work ethic and strength to really kind of reincorporate into his career, and later back into his education path. So that hardship in that phase of his life really helped him down the road to be superhuman. Take care of his nuclear family, take care of his immediate family, and then take care of his extended family overseas as well. And through that, really became something incredible. And that's really what we focused on. So just using that as the example, let's break it down to each component. What was the adversity you faced? So the way we started off is the passing of the person's father, and what that meant for him. Then the experience went into, okay, so how did you kind of overcome that challenge and adversity? I, had to work even harder at work. I had to put aside defer a lot of my dreams and aspirations. I had to look beyond my nuclear family and onto my immediate family. And I couldn't be selfish. I had to think about other people first, then before myself. I had to really push myself to excel at work. I didn't have any room for error. Right? I improved my work ethic, right? All of that was kind of like how the experience and how he overcame that experience. And what was his learning experience that kind of shaped his education career trajectory? I became more intentional. I became more empathetic. I became more focused. And through that experience, I feel like I'm a better professional. I'm a better father. I'm a better relative, and I'm a better leader, right? And that's really what you want to come out with, that positive learning experience, right? I say at the pro tip in the bottom, this can be personal, professional, extracurricular experience. Make sure you're humble, honest, and the central figure of the essay, which is mission critical. You're not talking about somebody else. But it could be either a personal thing that you face, like he did, but we mixed personal with professional and extracurricular because it's also part of the same thing. Or you could just focus it on the adversity you face as an extracurricular experience, only professional or only personal. It doesn't have to be a hybrid. All right. That's a good example of the adversity essay. 250 words. I would probably say about 75 for the intro, probably about 100 for the experience, and then the balance of, what is that? No, that's even too little. I think the balance about 75 words for the learning experience is fine. I think that would be it. So it'd be 75, 75, and 100 to get to that 250 mark, or something around those lines. All right. Okay. Any questions on that? If not, we'll charge ahead to the perspectives essay. I'm going to keep using this client I was working with because his essays, I think, are fantastic. God willing, he gets in to the Kennedy School because he really did a bang-up job on this. Describe a time when your interactions with others and or experience caused you to change your mind or expanded your point of view. Excellent essay. That was really good. In his case, we talked about how he had someone who was trying to undermine his authority at work. So now remember, the first essay, adversity, was personal with little streaks of work and little streaks of extracurricular. The second one, perspectives, we laden it in work so that we can flex that concept. And in the work itself, we started talking about that there's this person who's trying to undermine him and his authority, his leadership in his unit. He and was spreading false rumors. He went and got those rumors investigated to make sure that he could basically um, not only negate, but what is the term? It is absolve him and his department of any wrongdoing, which he was effectively able to do. And through that, he initially had a very negative reaction to that individual, but because of his own personal beliefs and so forth, he wanted to kind of extend an olive branch and bygones be bygones. So a year or two later, he extended that olive branch and he embraced that person and so forth. And then there's this extra wrinkle in there. It's not just this person hurt me, I extended an olive branch and so forth, because that may not change his point of view. It didn't change it, right? He had that issue and then he decided to embrace the person. So the extra wrinkle was that he embraced the person and found that there was a way that they could partner together on his unit. When he went back to his unit and told them, hey, I have this individual who, I have this individual, I want to bring them on to kind of help with a partnership between their unit and my unit. His teammates, the protagonist teammates, the client, basically told him, no, once you break trust, you break trust. You should never really reincorporate him back in with us. And he's like, no, no, no. He's come full circle. He's apologized. They're like, no, trust is trust. You can work with him at a distance, but you cannot trust him to kind of pull him into our project. And that was the change of perspectives. He was trying to extend an olive branch. He was trying to forgive and forget. His other teammates said, no, that's not something that they feel comfortable with. And he had to basically come to terms with what he deems as forgiveness. Other people may not. And that was a very interesting angle to kind of add to the whole equation. And then at the end of it, he realized that you have to, while you have your own personal perspectives, you have to respect the perspectives of other people. And trust is fundamental to anybody's calculus in terms of doing business or being friends or anything with someone. And once that's breached, it's breached. So in this case, again, you probably want to put in about 75 words in terms of what was your perspective initially. His perspective initially was that he basically set up the whole thing and then talked about his perspective. Then the experience is what caused the interaction, caused you to change your perspective. When he went back to his colleagues and said, hey, I want to bring this guy back into the fold, 1, 2, 3, and they said, no, you can't do that. He was disappointed because he really advocated for this guy, and they said, no, do not work with him. And then what was the learning lesson is that as much as he wanted to have his own perspective, again, in this way, he had to realize and respect other people's opinions as well. So what did you learn about yourself and others, and how will this help you in the future? That helped him in the future because he was able to see a whole litany of different people's perspectives, embrace it, and how do I say this? Embrace it and respect it, right? And form it as part of his calculus as a leader. Okay, so that's a good one. I put in the side notes. Show how you are open-minded and willing to admit you were wrong. And he said, look, we absolved ourselves of the situation. We brought this guy back into the fold. And maybe I was wrong because I was trying to forgive him and just quickly move on without thinking that trust is a major factor and forcing other people to put trust on the side. And that was not right. And so he was able to admit that. Be brave, authentic, vulnerable, and creative when writing this essay. And I fully agree because this essay is just so critical. It's such a good example to really get touchy-feely about something. So this guy anchored it in the professional side. And then the last one is the personal history essay, which was the diversity essay. Because back in the day, the essay, and I think we talked about this in the first webinar, it said, personal growth rely on engaging with varied perspectives, embracing our unique differences, and relishing in healthy debate. Our unique differences, I think it used to say unique differences, diversity, and relishing healthy debate. Please show how you contribute to the vibrant learning environment that is HKS. And I think they obviously removed the term diversity. Before we jump to the personal history, let's quickly answer a question from Anna. Can I use the angle of traveling to a lesser known countries in my perspective? This is beautiful. Yes, you can. To say, maybe you had to travel for work, or you had to travel with someone that you were not really keen on doing it because you didn't feel a sense of safety. You didn't understand that culture. You kind of wrote them off as being not necessarily in line with what your own personal beliefs were. And when you got there, you start speaking with the locals and try not to make it cliche, but really get into it. Use those 5 senses, 3 S's, 2 T's, right? Smell, sound, and sight, with taste and touch, right? Use those key 5 senses to really kind of go into that perspective, really talk about that experience when you travel to the other country, what you learned from it, what you understood, the humility that comes with it, and how it's expanded your point of view. Guys, I travel like a madman, right? Like an absolute madman, as you guys can see, in terms of my channel that I have on YouTube right here. And each one of these experiences itself is something that has allowed me to kind of see different perspectives. And while I may have been closed-minded in some ways, it really forced me to be much more open-minded through those experiences and exposure. So it's a great opportunity to talk about it, as long as it's not cliche and feels inauthentic, as you're just trying to create that experience without really having lived it. Okay? Let's jump into the personal history, because I know we're kind of close on time. Harvard, I believe, is about excellence. Personal growth relies on varied experiences, embracing our unique differences and relishing healthy debate. Please share how your unique contributions, please share how you would contribute. So as you can tell, in this essay, it's 2 parts, okay? It's a 2-part essay. You've got what your experience is in terms of your personal history, and then how you're going to contribute to Harvard. So you've got even a smaller amount of words to do it. So the intro should be about 50 words to kind of jump in and start talking about your background. And be wary that you don't want to kind of create redundancy. So if you've already talked about your background in the career goals essay, find a different way to kind of thread it through about your background and really kind of what makes you unique. So this is going to be personal. So if we've got professional, for example, for perspectives, we've got a professional and personal for adversity. Here, the personal history essay typically is very, very personal. So you start talking about your you start talking, get them engaged, start with an action, pull them in, and the compelling sense introduces your background as you see it there. Then talk about your background, the brief journey in terms of something about your worldview, seeing other perspectives and so forth, which is extremely important. And then, given that, how you plan to engage the community. So let's just say I'm talking from the perspective of having traveled extensively. I'm from, let's say, the Middle East. I'm from, let's say, a tiny country in the Middle East. I want to basically be part of the Middle East Student Association. I want to be part of this other association, maybe like the North Africa Association, where I can tie people together from Africa and the Middle East perspective. I also want to put together study tours or study trips to my country in the Middle East, whatever it is, so that way we can start talking about how you want to engage the community. I want to do more research. I want to do X or Y. So this is a good chance to flex how you're going to add to the Kennedy experience. And frankly, you're not going to have any other essay other than this one and a little bit in the career goals essay to talk about the Kennedy School. So you want to make sure that if the intro is 50 words, the background is about probably 75, max 100, because the engagement has to be at least a minimum of 100 words, right? So what is that? 40% of the essay should be about the engagement. Reiterate how your background embraces and celebrates differences, and emphasize your commitment to fostering a learning environment. Very, very important, being open-minded, being curious, and engaging with your peers. All right, so that's the personal history essay. Quickly talk about this. These are some of the winning checklists for story success. We talked about that as one of the areas, right? You got a solid hook, a solid theme that kind of is transposed against all your essays together. It's responsive to the question being asked. Remember, we said there was a 2-parter for the personal history, so you've got both covered. It's got a solid structure. There isn't any gaps in there. It's emotional, engages the people. It gets them emotionally connected to them. Creative, has examples, backs it by details, is accurate. You're not talking something that didn't really happen and then they can kind of verify it, and is relevant. Relevant to you, relevant to what you want to do, relevant to the school. All right. Those are your winning checklist. Again, all of this is in the guidebook that you can purchase as well. How do you get started? I'll quickly go through this. Ideation, brainstorming. We talked about that, the brain dump, then outlining, and you could use kind of like those different headers that we just covered. Introduction, background, engagement. You can use that as headers, right? So you can have introduction, background, engagement, and then put bullet points underneath each one, delete the bullet points, make them sentences, sentences into paragraphs, and then fine tune those paragraphs, right? That's how I would suggest doing that. Remember, HKS says about AI, all essays must be truthful based on authentic firsthand experiences without the use of generative AI. So use the AI for researching and ideating, but don't use it for drafting and editing your essays, because they could use GPT-0 and other programs to find out if something's more likely than not using AI, and they'll ding you for that. This is my team, phenomenal individuals, some of them which went to Kennedy School, some of them which have done some incredible stuff in policy. So I think they would be very, very capable of being able to really ace your applications should you need that support. I use always this incredible experience that we had where we helped a cohort of students, and we increased their admissions from 3 at the highest, 2 on average, to upward of 10 people were admitted in that year. This is some of the things that they really stand out. More clarity in terms of translating their clarity into laser focus. Their confidence grew through the process of us supporting them. We unearthed details and helped them really think through things. And it was a very cathartic and transformative experience, which is really what this Kennedy School experience is all about, putting these applications together. And as a final note, right in here, we have a special limited time offer. If you email us as soon as within the next 24 hours, you'll get a free consultation with me. So I'll review your profile and so forth. And you get a free Kennedy School admissions guide. So please feel free to do that. I didn't update this, but basically on the 23rd, we'll be doing another webinar. And we'll be covering, I believe, resumes and letters of recommendation. So make sure to also attend that so that you can learn, and that will be close to the final of the main comprehensive substantive parts of this process. And we may update the time, and I'll share that with you as well. So look out for that. We look forward to helping you. We're at the 30-minute mark, guys, and I appreciate your time and look forward to getting you into the Kennedy School.